Before this video starts, I want to make clear that nothing is open to discussion and everything I say is an absolute fact. Thank you. Conor McGregor. He's been making a lot of noise lately due to his desire for a fight and the seemingly non-cooperation from the UFC. It has actually been going on for quite a while now. Conor has been claiming to be ready for many months, and the UFC always has a different reason to push him back. First he was going to come back for December, but USADA. Then for March. Now they say June, but Conor says that nothing was even confirmed with him. Everybody has a different opinion regarding the subject, but I'll tell you the real reason, and it's so simple. Of course, there's the issue of maybe contract negotiations with Conor's, blah blah blah, and before that it was the USADA situation because he was on steroids for recovery. But what really pushed it so much further was actually ESPN. Think about it. ESPN owns the rights to the pay-per-views of the UFC. And this whole year we knew that the UFC deal with ESPN was coming to an end. And we know that as long as ESPN is the distribution company, the UFC's income per event, like the pay-per-view sales, stayed the same. I think it's somewhat around like 500,000 equivalent of pay-per-views that are being paid to them per event. So it doesn't surprise me that they try to wait out the end of the deal to collect all the money from a Conor pay-per-view in case they didn't renew it. It actually makes sense. Look at it this way. Either you put Conor in December and doesn't profit as much because he's part of the ESPN deal, or you wait him out maybe a couple more months, 2-3 more months, and you actually cash in the 1.5 million pay-per-view he's most likely gonna bring. The choice is pretty easy for the UFC, and even though they extended the deal with ESPN for another 2 years, they most likely use Conor like his imminent return as some kind of negotiation tactic. The problem was never Conor asking for too much money or him being too comfortable to fight. He's been asking for it like a madman for months. The problem has always been the distribution of the pay-per-view. And now that they extended the deal with ESPN, it would not surprise me if the June fight is actually happening. But before that, it just didn't make sense for the UFC to use Conor too early. In case they wouldn't re-sign with ESPN, they would have lost tens of millions. And in case they did re-sign with ESPN, they lost their trump card in negotiations. So it all makes sense now. The UFC didn't want to use the cash cow too early before having another deal. That's business 101. And even more so when you add the fact that Conor only has 2 fights left on his contract. The UFC really didn't want to waste what could be one of Conor's final money move for a company that they weren't even sure to re-sign with, like ESPN. Maybe the UFC wanted to go on their own platform. You know, they have the UFC platform now, the application on my phone, on the computers, on most TVs. There's the application of UFC now. So there were talks of maybe moving the pay-per-views over there. So it just didn't make sense to use Conor too early. Now, they probably have a new deal with ESPN that they're happy with because they negotiated it with Conor in the deal. If they used them too early like last year, there would be no guarantee for ESPN or any other distribution company. Now, whoever they decided to sign with, if it was going to be anything other than ESPN, now they can assure them at least 2 more Conor fights. But if they did that last year and they used up one of his fights already, the deal was not going to be the same. The negotiation was not going to be the same because now whoever they decided to talk with, they could assure them at least 2 other Conor fights. So everybody's happy. Everybody can benefit from the last 2 Conor pay-per-views if he actually decides to leave afterwards. The whole Conor-Dana negotiation period was never even about them. It was the UFC and the distribution companies negotiating a new deal with Conor inside of that deal to negotiate who was going to get all that Conor money. And that's why it took so long. So like I said, it all makes sense now. That's why Dana has been edging Conor McGregor. And every time somebody asks a question about him, he always has a different answer. Sometimes it's, oh, he's not healed yet. Sometimes it's, oh, Conor, he's too rich, he doesn't want to come back. But in the same day Dana says that Conor is too rich to come back, Conor is almost crying in an interview saying that he wants to come back. So it never really made sense. And when I did some digging, I realized that actually they just wanted to use him for negotiation with the distribution. And now I feel enlightened, and so are you. So you can thank me in the comments and by liking this video. And see you soon.